Has there been a game so damn good recently that has had so much trouble finding developers to make its sequel? A sequel that would probably just print money if it's good. Baldur's Gate 3 was a cultural force, a reckoning for the industry of good, compelling storytelling, unashamed and deeply emotional romance, heaps of missable content and meaningful choices, like whether or not you can actually cause a massacre or if you save the day. Not that I have any experience with that in the Last Light In or anything. That's totally not something that happened to me. But they did this all with a turn-based game. No action combat, no trendy real-time action events, and it wasn't in goddamn Unreal Engine like everything else. And yet the multi-time awarded Game of the Year that has cemented itself as one of the greatest RPGs of all time can't find a developer to make a sequel for it. First, it was Larian that said no, in part because, well, the IP isn't theirs. They're working on someone else's dream, playing with someone else's imagination. And while the magic worked once, it's not guaranteed to continue. And eventually they realized that as a studio collectively, they just weren't excited to do it. Now I should amend this because they did say no after saying yes. Apparently Sven Vinke was vulnerable after the launch of BG3 and agreed to make a sequel, even started work on it and had a partially playable build up and running. He said, quote, "You tend to be prone to do the obvious thing, which was really just make an add-on or a standalone add-on or start working on a sequel because it's the easiest route to take." Continuing, he said, "We should be looking at how we can do stuff that we get excited about." And apparently that's not revisiting Faerun, that's not going back to the well again and retreading what they've already done in a sense. In fact, it's actually more about burning effigies and like religious orgies in the game. Of course, with the lizards. But we now know that Larian wasn't the only one to tell Wizards of the Coast no. The person who told them no right afterward, you probably know, because they actually reached out to someone quite literally on their payroll, who also said no. James Olin, who co-created Baldur's Gate 2, who at the time was working at Archetype Entertainment on the new Mass Effect-inspired sci-fi RPG Exodus, was asked immediately after Larian turned it down, saying, quote, "The day Hasbro knew they weren't going to do it, Chris Cox called me. 'Hey, James, what do you think about Baldur's Gate 4? And I was like, I don't. I would fail, and here's why I would fail. I wouldn't want to compete against that. Doing Exodus is hard enough, but having to compete against Baldur's Gate 3, that would be insanity.' And it's kind of fair. They're basically asking James Olin, hey, how about you compete with not just Mass Effect, but also Baldur's Gate 3. You're being set up to fail at that point. No matter your pedigree, no matter your history. Part of it was the engine, Larian's proprietary engine that let them tweak and modify and add to take Divinity Original Sin 2 and bring it forward into a new generation with more power, beautiful cinematics, updated gameplay rules, but the same overall feel. Apparently James even asked if Hasbro could get them to license the engine, taking a huge weight off the task of making Baldur's Gate 4 in the same way that Black Isle licensed BioWare's Infinity engine. Putting aside the big if of that and whether it's something Larian would ever consider, James Olin was still of the mindset that essentially it's just too big of an axe to follow, especially if you tried to do the same thing. Now, James Olin himself would go on to get burnt out while working on Exodus and has stepped away from video game development as of this year. But I think his sentiment actually rings true with the feelings of a lot of fans of Baldur's Gate 3 right now. I've seen it in comments on videos I've made, other people have made, and just generally out there in the heaping pile that is the internet. If it's not Larian making Baldur's Gate 4, is it even worth it? Why do it? That's a very common sentiment that I see. Now granted, there's a lot of people that just want another Baldur's Gate 4, but I think in part that's because we want Larian's Baldur's Gate 4, and I don't know that any of us are necessarily going to be trusting any other developer to handle it, which is kind of ironic because at the time there was a lot of distrust around Larian making Baldur's Gate 3 instead of what was or what had been BioWare or Black Isle. But the thing is, we know it's happening one way or another. They are pretty committed to making a Baldur's Gate 4 eventually. Hasbro wants a Baldur's Gate 4. Hell, they want more D&D in general in video games, although they did just recently cancel a game with Giant Skull, the new developer headed by former lead on Jedi Knight and Jedi Survivor, so maybe they aren't quite as eager as it seems, or they're being a little more picky. It is a little bit heartening that the first person they called after Larian said no was James Olin, and who knows, with the other co-designer, Kevin Martins, apparently working on Baldur's Gate 2 Remake, that might be where they head next, especially if the remake does well. Kevin Martins, like Olin, was also working on Exodus, so still under Hasbro's umbrella. Though that might just be as much bad as good. I don't think outside of Baldur's Gate 3, we can look back at the past decade or so of how video games have been handled as a good thing with Hasbro. Let alone the fact that they reacted to the success of Baldur's Gate 3 by firing everyone that was remotely part of it. Look no further than the disaster that was Dungeons & Dragons Dark Alliance, a game that took beloved characters like Drizzt and Catti Bree, used a cult classic RPG title like Dark Alliance, which was an isometric action RPG, and made it into a bad, buggy, poorly balanced live service adjacent action co-op hub-based RPG with missions. And when I say bugged, I mean very, very buggy. It had none of the spirit of its namesake, which was bad enough, but was utterly doomed by game-breaking bugs that went unfixed, even after launch before it was mercifully pulled from stores. Yes, they abandoned the game. They don't even sell it anymore. And if you have it now, you can only play it offline. And that developer who made it, is currently working on the only confirmed D&D game that we know of right now, like fully confirmed game that has been announced with a trailer, Warlock. I'm all for second chances, and I'm glad Invoke Studios is getting a second crack to try and redeem from that mess of a game, but it doesn't inspire confidence that we have a canceled game from Giant Skull, failure to find a studio for Baldur's Gate 4, and most damning of all, the damn layoffs, and then the only thing they're going with is this game Warlock. When you continue to cut your institutional knowledge through layoffs, you can't turn around and go like, wait, no one knows what the fuck they're doing, because you fired the people that did know what the fuck they were doing, and you did it for stupid reasons. They did it because Hasbro themselves shit the bed with toy sales. That's not a joke, that's literally what happened. They had bad toy sales, so they laid off a ton of people, and Wizard of the Coast took a lot of it. But I don't want to end this video being wholly negative, because I'm still hopeful that we will get a Baldur's Gate 4 in the future, maybe from a new developer that we don't even know about yet. Maybe a developer that is made up of some of these industry veterans that have been unceremoniously laid off at different places and created their own studio, kind of like what's going to be happening with perhaps the spiritual successor to Knights of the Old Republic, or another co-op RPG that I'm really excited about from a new indie developer called Wildheart, that's kind of taking tabletop RPGs and saying you can play on your schedule with your friends, up to 4 of them, or well, 3 of them, because you are the 4th person. You can find information on both of those games, including some new information in this video right here. My name is Redbeard Flynn. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day, and I will see you all soon. You don't want to talk? Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Oh fuck! I killed Lucas! Oh shit! I didn't know!
Fred!
I didn't know! Hide the body!
Bro, his hair came off!
Hide the body!